What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry. Massive episode for you this week. We're bringing in our friend Shawn Syed from Sumersports. Sumersports, combining true NFL veteran experience with AI experts to make us smarter about the sport we love. He does the football integration at Sumersports. He is one of their film experts. He does such a great job of breaking down what he sees across the entirety of the NFL, and he's going to break down today for us what Josh McDaniels has done to help Drake Maye have all the success he's had through the first half of his second season. But before we get to that conversation with Shawn, I do want to talk about this tremendous matchup between the New England Patriots and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Win this one if you're New England, and in my opinion, you truly vault yourself into the conversation as being a legit contender on the road against a first-place team, 6-2, coming off a bye, and Todd Bowles is somebody who is going to turn up the heat again and again and again on Drake Maye. And if he can not only survive it, but thrive in that heat, then suddenly I think the entirety of the league is looking at this New England Patriots team as just a little bit better than already they have established themselves to be. I want to give you some really interesting numbers about this matchup right off the bat. The Bucs, defensively, stout. Third in EPA per play, sixth in EPA per dropback, third in EPA per rush, and fourth in blitz rate. There's that Todd Bowles signature, and you know what he's going to do to Drake Maye in terms of sending additional rushers at him so frequently. But Drake Maye against the blitz, one of the best in football. 7 touchdowns against 0 interceptions against the blitz this season. He's third in quarterback rating against the blitz. He's second in completion percentage, and he's second in EPA against the blitz. And some of the elements the Patriots have incorporated into their offense, those just so happen to be areas in which the Bucs defense, as good as it's been, has struggled. They're 29th in EPA on throws to the middle of the field. They're 23rd in EPA when teams go under center. And most interestingly to me, they're 25th in EPA per play against 12 personnel. That's 1 back, 2 tight ends. And they're 30th on dropbacks against heavy personnel. So that's anything with multiple backs or multiple tight ends on the field. That has to be music to Josh McDaniels' ears. The Patriots love using 12 personnel. They love going 21 personnel. They love sticking Drake Maye under center and allowing him to use play action. For more on all the levers Josh McDaniels has been pulling, specifically his use of 12 personnel, let's bring in our good buddy, Shawn Syed. There he is, our buddy, Shawn Syed. Shawn, thanks so much for being back with us here on Next Pats. There's so much Patriots stuff to talk about. People that cover the league, the entire league, people like you, are finally interested in what's going on here in New England after a couple of down years. Not saying you weren't interested in the past, Shawn, but things have gotten much more interesting. Let's just say that in 2025.
Bill, look, I've been on the show with you before. I made the Drake Maye rookie review video last offseason, so I'm all in. You know, the Patriots look fancy. You're fancy in this new studio. It is really, really exciting. I think the league is just better when the Patriots are exciting to talk about.
They are exciting to talk about. Exciting matchup this weekend against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But one of the reasons I wanted to bring you in this week is now that we are through basically a little more than half of the 2025 NFL season, you digging into the film and having dug into as much Drake Maye film as you have over the course of the last couple of years, what have you seen from this Patriots offense? And specifically, what have you seen from Josh McDaniels and how he's calling these games to best leverage that which Drake Maye does well?
I mean, there is so much there, Phil, because from a Drake Maye perspective, look, everyone watching, everyone listening knows that you could see the flashes last season. You could see, all right, I'm going to stiff arm this defensive end from the Dolphins, and I'm going to throw the ball over the entire defense. But this year, to see the little details of every time he takes a drop back, look at where he is in the pocket. It's super predictable. He's not floating. He's not drifting, obviously, unless he's pressured. So that is really, really helpful for an offensive line that I think is outperforming my personal expectations going into this season. And you mentioned Josh McDaniels, because McDaniels is such an interesting character, interesting just part of the New England Patriots history where, you know, are you sure when you bring him back, what is he going to be able to bring? And I think he has hit an absolute home run. He is at offensive coordinator of the year type levels in what he is doing to defenses. He is presenting looks with 2 tight ends, with 2 running backs. You're getting all of these different looks to force defenses to take a defensive back off the field, try and play you with a little bit heavier bodies up front. Now that's opening up a ton of space for Drake Maye off play action to make those nice throws going over the middle.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It does feel like Josh McDaniels really loves those 12 personnel sets with 2 tight ends, 21 personnel with a fullback. They signed an undrafted rookie this past offseason to play fullback. Unfortunately, Brock Lampy, we couldn't stop talking about Brock Lampy here on the Next Pats podcast. Unfortunately, he got injured before the season even began. But the reason we were so focused on him was this is always an element of these Josh McDaniels offenses, whether he's here in New England or he was out in Vegas, that he wants to be a part of his weekly plan. Now we're seeing it with Jack Westover, who's a converted tight end. And Shawn, quite frankly, until recently, I wasn't even sure how effective Jack Westover was in terms of being a blocker at that fullback position, but just having him on the field, what kind of impact can that make on a defense, just having those 2 backs on there when one is a fullback, or having those 2 tight ends, Austin Hooper and Hunter Henry? What kind of impact does that make on an opposing defense from what you've seen?
Look, everyone knows the Patriots run game, at this point, it's not the best run game in the league. It improved against Atlanta, but as you mentioned...
That's being kind, Shawn. It's being kind. They're one of the worst. It's been one of the worst.
Look, you've all been kind to me, so I can be kind to the Patriots run game. Again, I said it improved a little bit against Atlanta, but just the presence on the field of a second tight end or that second running back, that fullback type of player, where look, across the league, it's going to be an 11 personnel league. 1 running back, 1 tight end. As you get into 12 personnel, 1 running back, 2 tight ends. Like if you're an offensive coordinator, you are a problem creator. What problems are you creating for the defense? And some can do it before the snap. Some can do it before the even huddle happens, right? You see on the sidelines when the camera zooms, defensive coordinators calling out the personnel. Hey, the offense is in this personnel. We need to match it in some sort of way. And defensive coordinators right now, this actually isn't happening, I think, as much for the Patriots. They're doing a good job on the defensive end of matching personnel. But if the offense lines up heavy, the defense says, okay, they're probably going to run the ball. We need to make sure we get that extra linebacker. Let's take a defensive back off the field. And when you have less, pass defending bodies, you're going to be able to throw on teams a little bit easier. There's a touchdown against the Steelers. I mean, it was a red zone type situation, but you get 2 tight ends on the field. You're drawing a blitz and you get a play action, just a wide open guy in the flat. That Kayshon Boutte touchdown against the Browns, 2 tight ends on the field. Defense only has 4 defensive backs. You get that extra tight end there. Now we're able to just get that double move and really have that kind of pure isolation. So you see this across the league with a team like the Seahawks. We've seen it for a while, of course, with a team like the 49ers. So I'll be curious, our defense is going to adjust and look at this and say, oh, well, this guy's saying the run game isn't that good. It's a passing game that we need to stop. I think everyone kind of knows that and sees that, but still, as an offensive coordinator, present the defense with enough, make them take the bait, and now we have a superstar quarterback that can throw that ball right over the defense.
Yeah, it's been fascinating to see Drake Maye's growth, but it does feel like almost no matter what opposing defenses throw at him, he's been able to excel. So whether it's single high safety coverages, middle of the field open coverages, whether it's blitzes, not blitzed, he is really having success across the board. But I want to stay on this heavy personnel thing because I heard you on the Sumersports show recently with our buddy, another friend of the Next Pats podcast, Lindsey Rhodes, and you're talking about just the number of gaps. And I think our listeners and our viewers, Shawn, would be really interesting to hear you describe it because I think you break it down in such an incredible way for us to understand how having that heavier personnel on the field, and specifically those 2 tight ends, because it does feel like this is something that a lot of the league has gone to over the course of this year and the last couple of years, really. The number of gaps that creates in the run game and the math that's being done in the heads of these defensive coordinators and how they want to respond to that and what it does to the safeties on the back end and why it becomes a little bit easier potentially to throw the football with those guys on the field. How many gaps are you creating just by getting Hooper and Henry out there if you're McDaniels? And how has this helped Drake Maye?
So when we think about gaps, it's literally like the physical space between the center and the guard and the tackle and the tight end, and the tight end and now a second tight end. And when you have two tight ends in that kind of core part of the formation, you're creating 8 gaps. And a lot of defenses want to play like one player for one gap. Like no matter where you run, we're going to have a person that's going to be able to kind of in that space. So if you're presenting 8 gaps to the defense, that is 8 defenders that are going to be in that kind of box area. Now, I think a lot of the better defenses will play that gap from depth. But if I have 8 players in the box, 11 players on the field with no penalty, I mean, 11 minus 8 is 3. So we can only have 3 of those kind of deeper defenders. That is a really advantageous situation because as you get a little bit further down the field, you could drop whatever coverage you want. This becomes a one-on-one. Like you have to be able to run with our receiver, or you have to be able to play that double move from receivers that are, I think, emerging for the Patriots. So when you present 8 run gaps that you're going to force the defense to be responsible for, you're really encouraging them to stuff that box. Like that is a good thing. I understand people that say, okay, you need to be able to run the ball really well to win. Now, I will say, let's look at our beloved New England Patriots, who are not running the ball particularly well and winning a lot of games. Let's look at the Seahawks, who are a bottom-end run game right now, but they're presenting those 8 gaps. They're forcing defenses. Let me devote more resources to this. You're kind of tricking the defensive coordinators that have been trained for their whole life. If a team runs for us, on 4 yards of carry, like we're just not going to be able to do anything. But really, you're actually, you're using your formational advantage. You're using your personnel. You're using the smartness of having 2 quality tight ends that, look, the Patriots have been ahead in the past on having 2 really good tight ends. You're using that to your advantage. Make your quarterback's life easier because you have a quarterback that can do absolutely anything on a football field. Now we're going to make it easier for him. It feels like a cheat code for the Patriots.
And it feels like there's just this instinct, right, that's built into, not even just these defensive coordinators, but the defensive players themselves. When they see that fullback on the field or they see 2 tight ends on the field, they are going to, just by their nature, I think, Shawn, be ready to defend the run in such a way that it actually makes those play action passes and those play action fakes even more effective. That has been one of the fascinating parts of this Patriots season to me, is that they really, from the start of the year, they haven't been able to run the ball all that effectively, but they continue to try and they continue to slam their heads, it feels like, into a wall near the line of scrimmage. And yet, when they decide to pull that football out of the belly of the back and Drake Maye is allowed to throw down the field, he's had all kinds of success. He's top 10 in the NFL in a number of different categories when using play action. I'm looking at his quarterback rating right now, not the world's most perfect stat, but a decent indicator of just how efficient their offense has been on those types of plays. He's at 122.2 when using play action while having one of the least efficient running games in football. Is that something that you're seeing on film? Is that something that the Sumer data is suggesting to you too, Shawn, is that you don't necessarily need the world's best rushing attack in order to have a really good play action attack?
Absolutely. You can see it in just the numbers for teams. And I totally get the idea of if you don't have a good run game, then like you're not going to be able to run play action. To me, at this point in the long arc of NFL history, you need to present the defense with enough to convince them that you are running. If you can manipulate their defense just a little bit, force that extra player in the box. I'm glad we're having this conversation because someone could come back at me and say, oh, well, if you can't run, you're not going to be able to pass. Like, we have the numbers on the Patriots. Everyone's eyes are telling them that this team is struggling running the ball, but is able to do that. And part of that is just like a human element, right? If you are in under center, that is a really, really big thing that I like about the Patriots, because you have Drake Maye that, as I said, can do literally anything. Now McDaniels asked him, hey, get under the center, get that hard play fake. That's going to pull linebackers up. And to me, there are some offenses in the NFL where, look, when the offense gets under center and that play fake isn't that good, the linebackers aren't going to be as convinced. But this is part of like a cohesive offensive attack, which that's what I really like when I'm watching film, where it's like that run, it looks like their play action. Their play action feels like their run. The formations they're presenting really are connected to each other. So it's not just every time they get in this look, everyone knows it's going to be a play fake. If a fullback is running at you and you're a linebacker responsible for a gap, you are going to step up. I think the Patriots really understand that and know exactly how to manipulate that this season.
And I think the same idea applies with their tight ends, right? Even though Austin Hooper and Hunter Henry have been really valuable pieces to their offense, I'm not sure anyone would say they are road grading tight ends. They are Rob Gronkowski in his prime as a run blocker types. They're just not. They can do that, and they are effective in doing it, but they aren't these traditional run game only, blocking only, classic 265-pound wide tight ends either. They can get away with what they do in the blocking game. They're effective enough, but it's really what they're able to do in the pass game to take advantage of some of these defensive personnel packages that you're talking about, Shawn, that I think really makes them effective. And just to give you some numbers, this is from the Sumer newsletter. Shawn Syed, Tej Seth, these guys put so much work into this, and I'm going to pull up the percentages for the 21 personnel packages that the Patriots use, the 12 personnel packages that the Patriots use. Right now, in terms of 21, the Patriots are actually third in the league. Almost 17% of their plays, they have two backs on the field. And then when it comes to 12, they are 12th in the NFL. Almost 30%, almost a third of their plays, they've got two tight ends on the field. And I think it's helping, even though they're 30th in terms of EPA per rush. I think it's helping what they're able to do with creating some of these explosive plays down the field. They've got the fourth most or the fourth highest explosive play percentage in the NFL. So it's just been really fascinating to see how Josh McDaniels and Drake Maye have married up and how Josh McDaniels' ideas are helping Drake Maye and his physical skill set in his second year as a pro. Do you think it's sustainable, Shawn? That's the last question I want to ask you, because, again, we're halfway through Drake Maye's second season. We know he has boatloads of physical talent. Is there something about his game where maybe defensive coordinators are going to be able to figure him out, because it feels like they just haven't been able to through 9 games of his second season?
The one thing when you look at it on film, you see like, hey, there are a bunch of these sacks. You know, there are a bunch of situations where, look, some of them are the offensive line getting beat. Some of them are maybe holding on to the ball just a little bit longer. A lot of those, though, are these kind of like 0 or 1 or 2 yard sacks where he's trying to kind of run through the line or running outside and getting pushed out. So I don't see that as something that is going to be, that's going to like stop him from becoming an all-pro. Like I do feel like it's something that, hey, you're going to be able to get things smoothed out overall. You know, he's a quarterback that wants to extend play, so he's going to be a player that maybe it just does take sacks at a little bit higher rate than most players. The reason why I think it's sustainable is because there's a good chance that this is the roster that Drake Maye has, that it's like the worst one that he gets to play with for the rest of his career. And I'm not saying that it's like an awful roster by any means, but I would imagine that as time goes on, you get more development, you know, from a Kyle Williams, from a rookie wide receiver. You get a connection continuing to build with Diggs on the outside and on the inside. So, and you can also see the offensive line has outperformed what I've thought. I think that it's going to be able to continue to improve. So if it was a situation where, hey, this is a flash in the pan, this offensive success, it's all this kind of mumbo jumbo, you say this personnel, that personnel, but this is the trend of the league. Can you force the defense into a look that makes it easier for you to attack? This is a player that I just really think he's special, Phil. Like everything that McDaniels asked him to do, he does really, really well. So I do want to see, hey, let's smooth out those sack numbers overall. Let's have a few less of those sacks be kind of a little bit on your shoulders and maybe a little bit on another player's shoulders. Obviously, you don't want to blame kind of anyone or have to take any of those sacks, but it really does feel sustainable. And I think that's what's so exciting. Look at the schedule the rest of the way. You get the Jets twice. Like this is great. This is great news. This is going to be a playoff team. And I do think going forward, we're going to continue to see Drake Maye have success with Josh McDaniels.
All right. Shawn Syed. Shawn, thank you so much for joining us, for sharing all this insight, intel. Check out the Sumersports newsletter. Shawn and Tej do a tremendous job there. Also, check out Shawn on X at Syed Schemes. Does a phenomenal job. All the video breakdowns. You can check out his video work on YouTube as well. Shawn, you are the best. Thanks again for being with us.
Thanks so much, Phil. Appreciate it.
Coming up next on the Next Pats podcast, we're talking about a pass rusher to disrupt quarterbacks. We're talking about an offensive tackle to protect Drake Maye potentially in 2026 and beyond. And we're taking some of your mail. It's all coming up next on Next Pats. Welcome back to Next Pats. It's time for our Who's Next segment. This is where we love to talk about draft prospects and the players we are watching, the players we should maybe learn a little bit more about before next spring. And I want to start on the defensive side of the ball at the pass rusher position. I thought the Patriots might be able to acquire one at the trade deadline. They don't. They're led by Harold Landry. They have K'Lavon Chaisson, who's on just a 1-year contract. Let's see what they do this coming offseason when it comes to adding to that premium position. Could it be Keldrick Falk in the draft out of Auburn, 6'6", 285 pounds. He just turned 20 years old. Some of the numbers from this season might not necessarily blow you away. Only 2 sacks, 5 tackles for a loss in 9 games. And obviously Auburn, if you're following college football, having a heck of a time trying to figure it out. They just fired their coach, Hugh Freeze. But last year, had 11 tackles for loss and 7 sacks, and in the Iron Bowl, 6 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, forced a fumble, recovered a fumble. He was on Bruce Feldman's Freaks list. Bruce Feldman, friend of the pod, that Freaks list where he's talking about some of the best athletes in college football, 700-pound squat, 415-pound bench press. This guy has long arms. It looks like he could be a movable chess piece on your defensive line. Now, is that exactly what Mike Vrabel and his defensive staff are looking for? Typically, they want twitched up athletes to be able to get after the quarterback from the edge. Twitch, not necessarily at the top of the list of characteristics for Falk, but a great motor, which Mike Vrabel would appreciate, and all kinds of moldable physical skill. Again, he just turned 20 years old. If he enters the draft and decides to come out, he'd be 21 in the middle of his first season as a pro. Somebody his age feels like he is incredibly accountable. Another portion of his football character that I think Vrabel and the staff would appreciate. When Auburn fired Freeze, Falk, again, 20 years old, says, quote, "I take total responsibility for anything and everything that happens." That, to me, is exactly what you're looking for in a leader. And if he already feels that way at this stage of his life, never mind his football career, that to me is indicative of the kind of person, the kind of human being you might want in your program. All right, let's transition from somebody who could be getting after quarterbacks here in New England to somebody who could be protecting the quarterback here in New England. That would be Caleb Lomu out of Utah. 6'6", just a shade over 300 pounds, all kinds of athleticism, a very fluid mover for somebody of his size. Now, he has been playing left tackle the last 2 seasons at Utah. He's a redshirt sophomore, so another really young prospect with all kinds of upside. His teammate, Spencer Fano, who we've talked about here on Next Pats, might be the best tackle in the entire class. He's been playing on the right side. So maybe Fano is still the better fit for New England if you want to keep Will Campbell on the left side. If you draft Lomu, he does look like an NFL left tackle, just based on the size, the length, the athleticism. He is still, maybe because he's relatively young, growing into his body maybe to some degree. He could afford to get a little bit stronger, and so that would help him at the next level if he decided to stay at Utah for another season. But he has the potential to be a first-round pick. The question would be the fit here in New England. Do you stick him on the left side? Do you give him a redshirt season and try to feel it out and figure out where might be his best spot as a pro? Do you kick Will Campbell over to the right side? Do you feel like he might be able to excel there? Morgan Moses, probably not the long-term answer at that position, right? So it's all a question of fit and where the Patriots see somebody like Lomu fitting in with the rest of their offensive line and the pieces they already have. But certainly an intriguing prospect with all kinds of upside at one of the game's most important positions. All right, let's get to some of your mail, shall we? Let's start with Chuck, who says, "Hi, Phil. Maye has been sacked the most in the league. It's actually second most. Either way, not what you're looking for." Chuck continues, "Is the line that bad? Seems like he's contributed to a lot of those sacks holding the ball or stepping up into the pressure or trying to run and getting caught behind the line." I like this assessment by you, Chuck. And I think Drake Maye would actually agree with your assessment, Chuck. I asked him about the blitz and the success that the Patriots offense has actually had against the blitz, but I thought he gave a telling answer, which lends some insight into your question here, Chuck. So let's hear from Drake Maye and a question that I asked him earlier this week and what he said about his offensive line.
Yeah, I think the protection, the guys are picking it up. I think those guys, speaking of offensive line, have done a great job all year. A lot of the sacks I have taken have been my fault, been me holding the football. And, I want to credit those guys for what they've done in blitz pickup games and how hard they work on, watching film and watching, on Thursdays, the third down cut-ups and what they do kind of blitz-wise. So, and other than that, just my mindset of get it out and know that there's, less people, covering if they're blitzing and just trying to be, better and keep on growing against where guys are coming from and what they're trying to do behind the blitzes. Just trying to learn as much as I can of what these defensive coordinators like to do.
You can almost picture the plays in your mind's eye, can't you? Where Drake Maye holds onto the ball a little bit too long. He tries to step up in the pocket. Maybe he does have his eyes downfield, and that's where he gets hit. Or he's scrambling, and he runs out of bounds right behind the line of scrimmage. These aren't the worst plays in the world, and I think at times, even though you'd love to see the hits go down, you'd love to see the sacks and the losses of yardage go away. I think in some ways you just have to be willing to live with it to a degree because Drake Maye is who he is. This is part of what's in his DNA. He wants to be an explosive playmaker. Remember the sound from a couple of weeks ago. He doesn't necessarily want to be a check down Charlie. And that's all well and good. And the Patriots offense has benefited from that mindset that Drake Maye has. But it also will lead to occasionally negative plays. And so Drake Maye understands he wants to try to limit those. You do want to try to, as best you can, eliminate those. But they are going to be part of his game as long as he is somebody who is willing to hold on to the football, to maybe throw it down the field and maybe find that explosive playmaking option for a deep passing completion. Or maybe he's that guy who's going to hold on to it a little bit longer and have those eyes downfield as he's scrambling and he's going to turn into a scrambler. When you hold on to the football, as long as he does, and he's 11th in the league, almost 3 seconds on average is his time to throw, 2.8 seconds. And so that is a relatively long period of time in the NFL. It's just going to lead to some of these plays. The question is, can he eliminate them to a degree by the time you get to the end of his second season? You want to keep him healthy if you're Josh McDaniels, and so you do want to harp to him. He has to try to put a stop to those plays as best he can. Next question here touches on the trade deadline. Got a ton of mail about the trade deadline this week. This one is from Pat's fan. He says, you only get so many years to try to win a championship because of good injury luck, schedule, breaks going your way, etc. Why should we not be really upset as fans that we didn't try to make a big move to bolster the team? All right, I understand your frustration, Pats fan, and I know there are a number of you out there who are frustrated by the team's inaction. First, let me try to explain to you what the team's mindset was going into the deadline and leading right up until 4 o'clock on Tuesday. They were willing to make deals. So this was not a situation where they looked at their draft capital and said, we need every last one of those picks come hell or high water. They were willing to make trades. They did make calls. They did have conversations with even the Tennessee Titans. They were willing to make a trade there. The Titans were with the Patriots. They just weren't able to get anything done. But part of the reason they weren't able to get anything done was because they set certain values on the players they had targeted, and they weren't going to be so aggressive that they budged off of those. They know they need more young talent on this roster. They know they need multiple drafts to be able to get this roster where they want it to be, where they are consistently contending for championships. And they know in order to have successful drafts, the more picks, the better. Something we've talked about on Next Pats quite a bit over the years. Now, my opinion is they could have potentially been a little bit more aggressive. I think you could help your team in the here and now, help your team to try to have a fruitful January. If not eventually hoisting a Lombardi, and I'm still not picking the Patriots to win the Super Bowl this year, but I do think making the most of this season, and again, making a little run, maybe even deep into January, could have an incredible impact on what is a young roster that will be expected to contend for championships in the foreseeable future. So don't submarine your chances at having that sustainable winner by trading a first or second round pick. I would never have suggested that, and the Patriots weren't considering it. But could they have added, for example, Draymond Jones from Tennessee, a guy that Mike Vrabel has coached in the past, for a fourth-round pick and bolster your depth at a really important position? I think they could have. The Baltimore Ravens ended up giving a conditional fifth that could become a fourth to Tennessee for Jones. I get it. He's just a rental. I get it. The Patriots here in New England, whether it's James White or Trey Flowers or a number of others, they've hit on some fourth-round picks who have helped made champions here in New England. They've been core pieces to championship rosters. But I think there was an avenue to help this year's team, maybe give this year's team a better shot at getting that valuable experience in the postseason and still having the ability, having all the ammunition you need to build up your roster the way you really want to. But that was the team's thinking. That's my thinking on the trade deadline. Now that we've moved past it, I think if you're the Patriots, you're just hoping your injury luck continues to be what it's been, which is pretty good, so that there aren't a whole lot of second guesses as to what you might have been able to do at the deadline to guard against injury in the second half of the 2025 season. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Next Pats podcast. Thank you so much for listening and watching. Thanks so much to Shawn Syed at Syed Schemes for being with us this week and sharing some intel on what is making this Patriots offense tick through the first half of Drake Maye's second season. We'll be right back here next week after a massive matchup between the Patriots and the Bucs. We'll be looking ahead to the stretch run for the New England Patriots. Are they truly contenders? What happens this weekend could inform that opinion. We'll talk to you soon.